Have you heard this before? Our ESY program runs from June 12th through July 11th with the 4th of July off. It's Monday through Thursday, 8:30 to 11:30. We're not sure what building that's going to be in. And no, I haven't hired the staff yet, but that's what your child will be doing for ESY. And you're like, time out. That's what are you thinking about? So this is one of the four scenarios that I often see as an advocate when we are talking about ESY at IEP meetings. So that is the first one, is that the ESY program is already figured out, right? They already have it predetermined. Or maybe this is a scenario where like you're going through the IEP and you've done the goals and the service times, and there's something at the top that says ESY, but nobody stops and talks about it. So, like, you go to the next page, and it's, I have been in meetings, and I bet you have too, where extended school year isn't even brought up. So, that's our number two scenario. Let me know if you recognize that. And this is starting to be more common, that thanks, but no thanks. It's like you want my kid to go to a different school, we don't know which yet, with a different teacher, who knows who that's going to be, with how many other kids, and it's only from these weeks in June and July, but I really think my child needs extended school year for the whole length of that time. If if that's what you're offering for ESY, it's no. I That's not gonna be helpful for my child. And you wind up saying thanks, but no thanks. So that's scenario number 3. Let me know if you recognize it. And we have another scenario. You're told your child doesn't qualify for ESY. And you sit there in wonderment. I don't know. What do they have to do to qualify? And they go through this explanation of regression, recoupment. And because of that, your child didn't have any regression. So therefore, they don't qualify. So if you're familiar with that fourth scenario, let me know. So type 1 in the comments if ESY is already predetermined, and that's what happens when you talk about ESY. Or type a 2 in the comments if ESY was like barely, if any, discussed at the meeting. Or type a 3 if you said thanks but no thanks to the district's offer. Type of 4 if you're told your child doesn't even qualify for ESY. So if you are here with us live or on the replay, please chime in. And Hope is here, and she says number 1, where it's already been determined, right? So today we're going to be talking about what we can do to be maybe proactive before we go to that meeting about ESY, some questions that we can ask that opens up that conversation. And I'm also going to give you some examples of truly individualized ESY programs that I've helped parents advocate for. So we have 10 seconds of our intro music, and we'll be back. So, welcome, welcome. Say hi because I want this to be more conversational. So, as things come up for you, like type them in the comments and we can use that as more conversation or if a question comes up. So, what can we do instead? What questions can we ask? And what are some real life examples, right? There's so many myths about ESY, so I wanted to talk about this for a minute, where we've been taught that one of the big myths is that ESY is just for the summer months. And guess what? Your child can have ESY services at other breaks during the year if that's what they need. So with more schools doing year-long school, but then they have more breaks throughout the year, you can talk about ESY for those breaks throughout the year. So some of the myths that we've been taught besides, ESY is only for the summer is one that we'll go more in depth with is that ESY is only about regression or ESY is only for students with significant needs. What are some myths? What are some things that you were taught that you learned and thought was the truth about ESY? So chime in and let us know in the comments because it's like, ugh. And it's really interesting that there's nothing in the statute in the law about ESY and IDEA. However, in the IDEA regulations, there is just a few short paragraphs about ESY. So I wanted to share that with you. So we're grounded in no matter what state you live in, according to the federal ESY regulations, this is the minimum that your child should be receiving. And to remind you, I'm not an attorney and I can't give you legal advice. So let's look at, I divided this up into 3 slides so it's a little bit easier to see. So it says that each public agency must ensure that extended school year services are available as necessary to provide FAPE. That word is FAPE, consistent with paragraph A2 of this section. So let's go down here. It says extended school year services, and I like the word services, not program, must be provided only if the child's IEP team determines on an individual basis in accordance with these other sections that the services are necessary for the provision of FAPE to the child. So let's look at that and talk about that. And I was going to do something else, but because I don't know if you can. So, what are some important parts in here? First of all, it talks about if extended school year services are necessary to provide a free, appropriate public education for your child, then that's what they need to do. The other thing that's important here is, again, the reiteration that services are necessary for the provision of FAPE to your child. So when you go to your meetings where ESY is going to be talked about, one of the things that you want to casually mention is, I want to make sure that ESY services, and I would say services, not program, I want to be sure that the ESY services really provide the FAPE that my child needs. And so that could be one of your opening statements at your meeting. But there is more to the law. So let's see here. This is going to advance. The definition as used in this section, the term extended school year services means special education and related services. How many times are related services probably not talked about for ESY? They're provided for a child with a disability beyond the normal school year in accordance with your child's IEP at no cost to you, the parent, and it has to meet the standards of the state education agency, so your State Department of Ed. So let's look here. If I can switch out of here and look at the important language here. So they define the term extended school year. And like I said, this is important for us because I think so many times we look at maybe academic goals, but I don't know how many times related services are usually talked about. So if your child gets related services during the school year and you feel like it's important, they're maybe learning some new skills you don't want them to lose, that's a topic that you want to bring up. So it says beyond the normal school year. So it doesn't say summer, right? So anytime when there's a break in the normal school year for different vacations, you can consider ESY for that time and see if it's appropriate. It has to, the skills and the goals that your child will be working on during ESY need to be goals that are already in their IEP. Now, meet the standards of the State Education Association, or I keep saying association agency, your State Department of Ed, because you can see there's not a whole lot of language here in the regulations. And so, yes, we want you to know the federal regulations, but you really have to go back to your State Department of Special Ed. And usually, if you go to their website, your Iowa State Special Ed Department, and usually there's a search bar, so you can search for extended school year and it will pull up information. Some states have a specific like manual for extended school year. Some states have guidelines, some states have regulations, kind of depends. But you want to know because there's not a lot of specific language in the federal regulations. So they've really opened it up to your state gets to decide what they think would be appropriate. So that's important for you. And I was going to go back because I think I missed one of the slides. So let's show this one. This is the other part that's super important, right? It says the public agency, which is like your school district, may not limit extended school year services to a particular categories of disability. And the schools may not unilaterally limit the type, amount, or duration of those services. So again, if we look at that important language, if they say, no, our ESY program in our district is only for students with significant cognitive disabilities, that's not allowed under the federal regs, which means it can't be allowed either under your state regs. And they can't unilaterally like predetermine and limit the type, the amount or duration of these services. So again, this is like really helpful language for you to know what's in the federal guidelines and to have that part of the conversation. To say, my understanding is the district just can't limit and say, this is how many weeks you get, the times of the day, and this is what it is. It has to be individualized for your child. So let me know if seeing those federal regulations is helpful. Hey, Hope, she says, only for the summer and must be completed at the school of their choice. Yeah, and Hope, I can't remember what state you're in. Um, huh. Yeah, and see, that's what you can do is, and I'll be putting this out in my newsletter. So if you don't get my newsletter, Hope, I don't know if you're on my newsletter list. You can go here to sign up, but yeah, for sure. That's when you want to know what your state regs say. But yeah, I just bring out this and say, according to the federal regulations, we can't, we're not supposed to have those kind of limitations. Oh, she's in PA. Hey, Hope, did you know decades ago, my husband and I graduated from Slippery Rock State College in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. Yeah, so for sure, that's yeah. And I don't know, completed at the school of their choice. That would be interesting to see if that really needs to happen. However, I would guess that most parents would rather have it, be at the school that your child's already attending just because of not wanting to make all those transitions. But let's go into some other things here. And the first one that I want to talk about, and this, I always like to say red flags, right? Is to recognize that red flag or to recognize when you're being gaslit about predetermined ESY programs. And depending on your relationship with the district and the school, uh, sometimes you need to be more specific with the language that you use. So if you use the word predetermined, that will perk up everybody's ears because that is like a huge no-no with IEPs is for anyone and the school staff to predetermine what the outcome is going to be. If you hear in a meeting, it's going to be June 16th through July 2nd and 8:30 to 11:30 and Monday through Thursday, you can say, I understand that might be what the school district typically offers for ESY. However, it seems like that's already decided, and we haven't even had time at the IEP table to discuss ESY at all. Ooh, using those, I don't know if you want to call them trigger words, it seems negative, but predetermination, predetermined is a word that will get people's attention. So sometimes those kind of words are good to have. Another like succinct kind of question that you could ask in this situation is, are we talking about what the district has already decided? So we're not using the predetermination, but we're still letting them know we know what's up and up here. And I'm confused. Are you saying that the program's already been decided? So that could be another question. Yeah. Um, and like I said, I think the common story of the problems with predetermination is when parents find out it's not going to probably be at the school that your child goes to. It's probably not going to be the staff that works with your child. Your child may be mm, grouped with multiple age groups from kindergarten through sixth grade or something. So when that's that wrong kind of fit, we need to make sure that we speak up about it. So one example of this, and I was working with a family who has a son at middle school, and he really has significant reading needs. And he's finally they finally have found a reading program and qualified staff, and he's just finally starting to make some gains in reading. And so we were like, we really need to talk about ESY for reading. And so the staff was excited that we kept bringing this topic back up. However, they did finally say yes, that he was eligible for ESY based on this emerging reading skill that he had. However, they still offered that same old program. And we're like, we know this is not going to work. So it's going to be middle school and high school kids together. Imagine that. And it wasn't probably going to be with anybody that was really a certified reading interventionist. However, we could not get them to change their minds that, oh, they were confident that ESY would be appropriate for him. He went the first day to ESY. It was a disaster on many levels. And the special ed director was like making her rounds, and she like came into the middle school, high school class for a while. And she called the parent later, and it was, I don't think this is going to be appropriate. We need to talk some more. Luckily, we had a special ed director that was actually observing things and that wanted to talk to the parent. And what happened is instead of that second day of ESY in the middle school, high school class, the district had a reading interventionist go to this child's home and do direct reading instruction with him. And that became his ESY services, not the typical program. And it was 3 days a week, and it was more weeks during the summer. So there are examples, there are times when this has helped, and you can get something that's more individualized for your child. So let's see what's next. I have to keep putting my glasses on. So the other thing that is important besides noticing when you see those red flags, but to bring the conversation back to your child, to make sure we're focused on your child, what their strengths are, how we can build on that, what their needs are, and how we can address that during ESY services. So one of the things that you can ask is a question based on Chris Voss's work, Chris Voss. And it's a great question to ask for many different situations. But here you could say, would it be a ridiculous idea for my child's ESY services to be individualized to his needs? Now, of course, your tone of voice is going to be important because you can really be sarcastic when you ask questions like this. And sarcasm has been, I don't know if like a skill, but it's something that I've had to realize you don't want to use all the time. So when you ask these questions, make sure you have this friendly, open tone of voice with it too, because yeah, it makes a difference. So when our son Dylan was in elementary school, he was fully included and he had a lunch bunch once a week with SLP and some of his friends. And he got to pick the friends that would come. They would eat their lunch, they would have conversation. He would get some services that way and support because we wanted it to be in real situations. So when we talked about ESY for Dylan when he was in elementary school, they knew not to say, this is what we offer, because my husband and I were sitting at the table. And so instead, we brainstormed and it was like, what could this look like? And it was so amazing and fun to see the brainstorming that went on at the meeting because so many times it's like cut and dry and you don't have time to think outside of the box. So, anyway, for our son Dylan, what we did for several of the summers during that summer break is he got direct services from the same SLP that worked with him during the school year. So that was a bonus. And that's nice. She wanted to work during the summer. And instead of sitting down and having direct like articulation therapy, we were really focused on using, I don't know, I don't know the speech terms, but working on his articulation in natural environments. I guess I'll say it that way. And so the SLP would take Dylan, they'd walk up to the 7-Eleven and buy some kind of a snack and talk and walk back. And she just did these neat kind of community activities with Dylan. Or they would go up to the elementary school's playground in the summer when there were other kids playing. And so that's what his extended school year services looked like. And it was like wonderful. And it made a huge difference for him. So let me know. Do you have any ideas floating around there of, ooh, I wonder what ESY could really look like for my child? So let us know. Now, the other thing, and we talked a little bit about this when we were looking at the regulation for IDEA about ESY, is to have the focus of the conversation on your child, and then also talk about what's a free, appropriate public education when you look at ESY. For me, I always want to keep the least restrictive environment in mind when we talk about FAPE. And that's one of the things that can be really tricky if your child goes to the typical district ESY program, is he's probably only going to be with other kids that have IEPs. So that's where in trying to think outside of the box can be really helpful because there's other places, like for our son Dylan, it was in the community. And that was his least restrictive environment. And that was the part that was really important for him. If you get an administrator at the meeting saying where it is, what time it is, what they do for transportation, nah, you can just say, I wonder what other options we could consider. And again, I don't know, at least for me, I think it's important to open up those conversations and not be like, let me tell you what IDEA says. And I don't think what the district is doing is working at all. There's a time and a place to escalate, but hopefully you're at a nice conversational level at your IEP meeting. And so you just want to say, I understand that's what the district offers now. I'm just wondering what other options we can consider. And then pause because you're expecting an answer. Because when we ask questions, if we don't pause and we keep talking and asking more questions, we never hold the school team accountable for answering our questions. So ask the questions, what other options can we consider? And then pause. So this reminds me of a case, and it was an upper age elementary student. And again, the typical ESY program that the district was talking about, it's like, this, no way is this going to be helpful for this child. So the mother and I were assertive advocates, and we had more than one meeting about ESY. And what was so wonderful was we were able to come and craft these ESY services for this student based on who he is, what he loves to do, what are the needs of the emerging skills that he has that we want to make sure we address. And what we came up with was for this student and a para that had worked with the student during the school year. So she was hired for the ESY services. And this student signed up for a variety of classes, open gym time, different things at the local YMCA. And you might think, Charmaine, was he working on gross motor skills? No, but that could have been a good match. Oh. The emerging skills that he had was those social language skills, making friendships. How do you go up to somebody and say, hey, want to play kickball? Or so that social language part, that was emerging for him. And we wanted to keep it going. But again, we wanted it to be in more natural settings. And if you have a Y or a park and rec program during the summer, and you can tie that into some of your child's needs, that can be a perfect place because it's not a segregated class, right? It is a least restrictive environment for kids to be with other peers that don't have disabilities, right? So again, that's something that actually happened. And I always say, if it can happen for one family, it can happen for your family. So let's keep that in mind. And questions, comments, let us know. The fourth, the fourth scenario is when we fall into that regression trap. And yes, regression and recoupment are probably going to be topics or factors that come up when you talk about ESY. However, they're not the only thing. And so many people, staff, and I think it's because a lot of the staff don't know what the federal state regulations are. And so it's like they've been told something by the district administrator and they figure that's how it is. And If the district administrator says, I don't want to see anybody on ESY unless they have, regression and recoupment, it's okay. Those are the orders that we have. But instead, look at your state guidelines because, as I have mentioned a few times, it's like emerging skills is something that is quoted in a lot of state regulations. So if your child, like I said, had this emerging reading skill or being able to increase their social language with friends, those skills are really important. And so look at that and not necessarily only regression and recoupment. And regression means that your child loses a lot of skills during the break from school. And recoupment means not only did they lose a lot of skills, but now it's taking them longer than for typical kids to regain those skills back. So that's the concept of regression and recoupment. However, there's in some states, they also talk about life skills like toileting. If toileting is an emerging skill for your child, it's, I don't want to lose this momentum that we gained during the year. So there's a lot of different reasons that your child could be eligible for ESY services. One of the things that you can ask during your meeting is, what criteria do our state regs refer to besides regression? Now, if you watch enough TV shows about lawyers, they talk about don't ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. So before you ask this question, you go to your state special ed department website, search for ESY or extended school year, and you know what your state says, what the criteria is besides regression. But you open the conversation with, I'm just wondering, like, is there other criteria that the state regs allow and say kids are eligible for? And then you stop talking and you wait for somebody to answer you. So here's our next story. Oh, this is the one that I shared in the beginning. Sorry, I got my stories mixed up about the middle school student who that ESY program wasn't it. And the parent was able to get that one-on-one reading support. So, yes, that made a huge difference. So, today we've talked about one, what the federal regs say about extended school year, and some of that important language. And I'll share this slide again, that the district can't unilaterally limit the type, amount, or duration of these services. So the federal regulations are our friends. And then we talked about, yes, the federal regulations are pretty broad and they really allow the states to determine what that's going to look like. So that's when you also have to know your state regulations. We talked about 4 different scenarios that are typically seen at ESY meetings. I'll go back here so I don't have to depend on my memory. That the ESY program is already determined before you sat down, or it's hardly discussed at all in the meeting, or what they offer is, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Or the 4th scenario is that you're told that your child isn't eligible for ESY. We talked about questions that can open up the conversation at the IEP meeting when you do discuss ESY. And I gave you some real life examples of individualized ESY. So, yes, it can happen. And I'm going to be doing a summary of this and also a specific ESY guide. So if that, is something that you would like, make sure you sign up at iep.today/advocate. And let me get my glasses. Melissa, hey, hey. How are you? She said, I have no idea if my school district has summer school for typically developing kids, but I feel like a para going with my child to something like that would be much better for LRE. Yeah, for sure, Melissa. And that's the thing, like thinking outside that box, right? Mm, Because I think a lot of school districts, especially it seems like for elementary kids, don't offer typical summer school programs. A lot of times it's more middle school, high school for like credit recovery and things like that. But yeah, being able to see like, how is my child going to get the academic or the related services that they need during this break from school, and thinking about, and where can they be connected with other kids? And like I said, Park and Rec can be a really great place to go, as far as a lot of times during breaks from school, they might have like specific things, or like a boys and girls club. Um, yeah, to think about places where other kids are is, if you can work that in with the ESY services, that would be fun. So let us know, Melissa, if you come up with an idea, because I think that would be great to talk about. So thank you so much for being here live or watching the replay, because all of this matters. And for you to feel confident going in there, like, actually, I know this is my child's rights, and this is something that I can ask for. And like any other IEP meeting, if you make specific requests for ESY and those requests are denied, then expect to get a prior written notice that explains what they considered, why they made that decision, and keep that paper trail going. So thank you so much. I enjoy having conversations with you. I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent of an adult dealing with Down syndrome. I'm a retired teacher. I was both a special ed and a general ed teacher. And I've been a professional advocate for a number of years. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. And we all need to keep on keeping on. Okay. Take care.